Among the many mystical insights attributed to Padre Pio of Pietrelcina, there is one warning that strikes with particular force in the modern world: the grave spiritual danger of disrespecting elders. In an age that glorifies youth, speed, and independence, Padre Pio's vision and teachings on this subject sound almost prophetic. He did not speak of this sin lightly or as a mere social failing. Rather, he described it as a deep wound inflicted upon God's order, one that silently corrodes the soul and bears consequences that often remain hidden until eternity. Padre Pio repeatedly reminded his spiritual children that God does not judge as the world judges. What people dismiss as normal behavior or personality clashes, heaven often sees as acts of injustice, ingratitude, and cruelty. In one of his spiritual experiences, recounted by those close to him, Padre Pio spoke of seeing souls after death who were in great anguish, not because they had lived openly immoral lives, but because they had failed in something deceptively simple, honoring their elders. These souls had lived respectable lives by worldly standards. They worked, raised families, and were even seen as good people. Yet in God's light, a hidden pattern of contempt, impatience, and neglect toward parents and the elderly stood exposed. In the vision Padre Pio described, these souls were astonished by their judgment. They cried out that they had not committed grave sins, that they had gone to church, avoided scandal, and lived decently. But the response they received revealed a truth they had ignored in life. Every harsh word spoken to a parent, every sigh of annoyance, every act of abandonment or emotional coldness toward the aged had been recorded. What they had called stress, modern life, or generational misunderstanding was shown to be a refusal of love. Padre Pio explained that the fourth commandment, "Honor your father and your mother," does not expire when a person reaches adulthood, nor does it weaken when parents become frail, poor, or dependent. On the contrary, he said, the commandment reaches its deepest meaning when elders are weakest. In his vision, the suffering souls realized too late that honor is not limited to obedience in childhood. It includes patience, reverence, gratitude, care, and compassion throughout life. One of the most striking elements of this vision was how Padre Pio described the spiritual blindness that accompanies habitual disrespect. The souls he saw had not set out to be cruel. Their sin grew quietly. A sharp tone here, a sarcastic remark there, a refusal to listen, a decision to place parents in isolation while excusing it as convenience. Over time, these acts hardened the heart. By the time death came, their consciences had grown dull. They no longer recognized their behavior as sinful, and this blindness followed them into judgment. Padre Pio emphasized that elders occupy a sacred place in God's design. They are living witnesses of sacrifice. They carry stories of suffering endured silently, prayers whispered in darkness, and burdens borne for the sake of their children. To dishonor them, he said, is to trample upon a lifetime of love. In mystical language, Padre Pio taught that Christ hides himself in the elderly just as he hides himself in the poor and the sick. When an old person is mocked, ignored, or treated as useless, Christ himself is being rejected. In the vision, Padre Pio saw how deeply this sin wounds Jesus. He explained that many people would never dare to insult Christ directly, yet they do so indirectly when they despise those in whom Christ dwells. The elderly, bent by age and slowed by weakness, reflect Christ in his passion, vulnerable, dependent, and easily overlooked. To reject them is to repeat the rejection of Christ on the road to Calvary. Padre Pio also connected this vision to the breakdown of families and societies. He warned that when respect for elders disappears, blessings are withdrawn. Homes become spiritually empty, prayers lose their strength, and children grow up without roots. In his words, a society that discards its elders is a society that has forgotten God. He believed that many personal and communal sufferings arise not from dramatic sins, but from the quiet erosion of reverence within families. The saint was especially severe toward those who justified neglect with modern excuses. He acknowledged that life can be demanding, but he insisted that love always finds a way. In the vision, souls who had abandoned their parents, emotionally or physically, realized that convenience had become their God. They had prioritized comfort, career, or reputation over duty. At judgment, these choices were revealed not as neutral decisions, but as acts of selfishness that had deprived others of dignity. Yet Padre Pio's message was not one of despair. Even when recounting this vision, he spoke with urgency rather than condemnation. He insisted that as long as life remains, repentance is possible. A single sincere act of humility, a word of apology, a gesture of care offered to an elder can open the floodgates of grace. He often told penitents that God's mercy is immense, but it must be sought before death. After death, the truth is seen clearly, but the time for merit has passed. Padre Pio urged people to examine their consciences honestly. He asked simple but piercing questions. How do you speak to your parents? How do you treat the elderly who inconvenience you? Do you listen, or do you dismiss them as outdated? Do you show gratitude, or do you harbor resentment? He believed that many confessions were incomplete because people overlooked these sins, focusing only on what the world labels as serious. In his spiritual guidance, Padre Pio often reminded people that honoring elders brings hidden rewards. He taught that those who show patience toward the aged receive special protection. At the hour of death, he believed that mercy shown to parents attracts mercy from God, and that tenderness toward the elderly softens divine judgment. Conversely, he warned that those who are harsh toward their elders may find themselves abandoned spiritually when they need comfort most. The vision ultimately served as a mirror. It revealed how love is tested not in grand gestures, but in daily interactions. It exposed the danger of pride that refuses to bow before age and experience. For Padre Pio, disrespect toward elders was not a minor flaw. It was a sign of a heart drifting away from God's order. In today's world, where aging is often treated as a problem to be managed rather than a mystery to be honored, Padre Pio's warning resounds with renewed urgency. His vision challenges modern attitudes that value productivity over presence and independence over communion. It reminds us that the measure of a soul is found in how it treats those who can offer nothing in return. Padre Pio left this message as both a warning and an invitation. A warning that neglect and contempt carry eternal weight, even when disguised as normal behavior, and an invitation to rediscover reverence, gratitude, and love before it is too late. As he once implied with sobering clarity, many will beg for mercy at death, only to realize that mercy had already stood before them, gray-haired, fragile, and waiting to be loved. Share it and subscribe to our channel for more beautiful visions from Padre Pio.